What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another video of Tristiano Stuff. Today I'm going on a walk while I film this, but today I'm going to talk about languages instead of a letter. Anyways, languages are something that I find very interesting. And this is for a class of mine. I do a lot of those. So this one is for Mod UN. And what I wanted to discuss with regards to languages in Mod UN is there's, well, two things really, kind of three. We're going to talk about linguistic minorities, all right, and how to handle policy relating to linguistic minority issues in the United States. Then the other aspects are more international, conlangs and what should be done about either promotion of or stuff like that with lingua francas and whatnot, and also reconstructions of languages that historically existed and the importance of that. So first off, we'll talk about minority languages being spoken. And while in the United States there's obviously issues, I wanted to cite France as an example. So France has a lot of minority languages: Occitan, Catalan to an extent, Corsican, and Breton. And a lot of these languages, actually all of these languages, are significantly repressed by the French government. The French government has very little minority recognition of these languages, unless that's recently changed, which I've heard some things about it. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but they had very little recognition of it. And that is kind of problematic in my opinion, because if you look at, especially Breton, or Occitan as well, these languages are part of language families that are very much already pretty dead. Like Breton is one of the closest relatives of Cornish. Cornish is something I'll talk about in another topic, in another part of this video, but is very, very, very close to extinction. It's stuff like that, you know, and it's part of the Brythonic branch of the Celtic language family, which only is Cornish and Breton. So that linguistic, those troubles linguistically obviously show kind of a problem with that. And the fact that it's being repressed and losing speakers at a rapid rate, I think, is kind of an issue. And I want to talk about, like, what does that mean? What's the significance of that? Obviously, loss of culture. A lot of culture is expressed through language. So losing your language, this Brythonic language, means you're losing your culture. And obviously, I think that's part of the French tactic. They want to assimilate minority groups into their own. Other countries do this a lot differently. Switzerland and Spain, for example. Spain hates the fact that they do it, but they give tons of autonomy to every single region in their country, and you see languages like Catalan thriving, Valenciano, which is basically just Catalan. Don't tell that to the Valenciano out there, or to the people from Valencia out there, but it's just Catalan. You have Galician, and then you have also dialects that are pretty unique compared to just regular Castilian Spanish, like Andalusian especially, with a lot of Moorish and Arabic influence. So I think that the Spanish approach, or even the approach that is taken by Switzerland with regards to Romansh, is pretty effective, though there's issues with that. And so many videos about that are very interesting. I do recommend looking more into the Swiss situation with Romansh. But while it's still very small, it's making a slight comeback. So the approach is and they have it as an official language, along with Italian, French, and German, and those all thrive in their own respective areas of the country. So I think that this approach of being less demanding about the language that you have to use and whatnot is very good, and allows for more diversity. Now, in the United States, a lot of this has to do with immigration. We have tons of immigrants. We're a country, we're called the nation of immigrants, right? And nowadays it hasn't changed. We still have a lot of immigrants coming here, and while the foreign-born population isn't like too high as a percentage per total number of people, it is, and there are languages that are definitely minority languages, right, and still very sizable. But even they don't get that much recognition. I mean, in where we live, my elementary school had a Spanish language program, but many don't. Many times it's hard to get access to these other minority languages, and ESL programs make it to where it's like to help try and adjust that problem. But I mean, there's still a problem there with it. Also, it kind of establishes a sort of stereotypical, not stereotypical necessarily, but like a dominance of the English language as opposed to those. So like, how should that be treated? Obviously in America, it's probably a good idea to know English, but should it be treated the way it is? What do we need to do? You know what I mean? And also, a lot of the times with Native American languages that have dwindled significantly, should there be anything done about that, specifically from the linguistic aspect of it? Obviously, we did already do a discussion on Native American tribes and cultural things, losing their culture, etc., but linguistically speaking, specifically linguistically speaking, how can you try to help with that? And then I want to talk about more international conlangs, such as Esperanto. Conlangs typically are used as a lingua franca. Obviously, there's not much reason to create a language to represent a cultural group. But Esperanto has kind of become like its own niche cultural trait that like anybody can become a part of, really. It's not specific to a singular culture, but it does definitely help define part of like who you are. If you speak Esperanto, it's like a very interesting thing to do. And it was created by this Polish guy, I forget his name, and I believe he's an Ashkenazi Jew. So initially it was kind of a language used for Jews as well as Yiddish, as a kind of way to communicate with others, Germanic and whatnot. And just a general conlang for people of the Germanic and Slavic languages to communicate between each other. And nowadays there's around 1 million speakers, but I wanted to know what like sort of issues relating to the spread of Esperanto need to be addressed. Like, should it be encouraged as a lingua franca in these countries, especially the ones where it applies more so, like in Western or in like Germanic speaking countries in Europe, and Slavic countries like Poland especially, or should it just be left to its own deal? And also, for flying, the language of flight, of aviation, is English. But is that the way it should be? Or should we make it to where it is Esperanto, maybe? Because, well, it's not a specific group's language, you know what I mean? Like, how should these things be taken, the promotion of them? And should there be restrictions to how conlangs are made and treated? Just how should we handle conlangs in general? Should they be left to their own, or should they be promoted with certain regulations on how to promote them? And then the other issue I wanted to talk about was reconstructions. There's been multiple examples. This is where I said I was going to talk about Cornish. Cornish was reconstructed after going extinct very briefly, but there was enough documentation to save the language. And this is a pretty big deal, if you ask me, because people from Cornwall, they do exist, they're Cornish, they feel Cornish, but losing that language meant that they lose a large part of what made them Cornish. And reconstruction of it was definitely vital to the Cornish culture and Cornish independence movement. Though small, it does exist, so you have that to look at too, I guess. But then you also have to consider other languages. Hebrew, that is a language spoken by the entirety of Israel. It is the actual language of a whole country, but it went extinct as well in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe a little earlier in the 1900s, and was reconstructed by the Jewish state, or the Israeli state, because obviously that would be a significant language to their people and to the religion as a whole. And obviously there's documentation of it. I mean, you have the Bible, Torah, etc., etc. So that documentation made it a lot easier to do that. But some languages really don't have that much documentation. For example, there's a language called Ninorn, well, Norn, actually. Ni Norn is the name of the reconstruction of it. And it's spoken in the was spoken in the Shetlands and Orkneys. But there's not too much documentation. There was this one linguist from the Faroe Islands who did go to the Shetlands and Orkneys towards the very end of the language's life, and documented it a little bit, heard it a little bit, and most of our knowledge of the language comes from him. Some Bible verses and whatnot are remembered and even still spoken, but it is essentially dead. So they're trying to reconstruct it, though, and that is Ninorn. But there's a lot of obstacles on how you can do that. It's difficult to do. So what do you think should be done to kind of handle those obstacles? What sort of methods can be done to kind of try and reconstruct it? I mean, there's obviously, you can look at what knowledge is known of related languages and do piecing together, or languages that are likely to have influenced it. But you kind of have to do a lot of piecing together. For example, the language Proto-Indo-European has been pieced together by taking words from all sorts of languages, cognates, right, and connecting them. But you also have to consider how languages evolve through societal contact with others. For example, Norn would have had a lot of contact with English speakers, as the Shetlands and Orkneys were controlled by the UK for a long period of time, and Scotland as well. So those influences definitely got into Norn, or Norn, just regular Norn. So how do you account for them? How do you know how much that is? And what do you think you have to do about that to see how that works? Anyways, that's really all I have for this video. I hope we have a good discussion in class. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.